Welcome to another episode of the Long Game Podcast by Penjana Capital. Sharul here, and I'm very pleased to host my dear friend Patrick Yip from Intudo Ventures. So let's just jump straight into it. First of all, Patrick, I'll just give a bit of a background on the talking points of today.
Sure.
And then we will start going into the nitty-gritty and the questions. So the first talking point is on the growth and development of the Indonesian startup ecosystem. So just a bit of background. Due to Indonesia's large population and unexplored potential, Indonesia is known as the country of unicorns, having given birth to 9 of them and 1 decacorn. Government laws, example, minimum investment requirements in startup infrastructure, play a vital part in the ecosystem in Indonesia, in its growth and development. So entities that can give financing and assistance, VCs like Kejora and Intudo, to take a chance on these businesses are very crucial enablers in the ecosystem. They may assist to cement company strategies to ensure that they are sustainable and scalable, as well as provide access to critical contacts that they may not otherwise have. So Indonesia is very lucky to have a government. From our side, we can see it's truly supportive for startups. Government has sponsored programs such as the 1,000 Startups Movement, which gives possibilities for pilot testing and proof of concept, extending beyond mere ideation. It also enables networking, interacting with other founders, angels and institutions, which may aid in exposure and reputation, both of which are vital for due diligence. Then there are the regulators, such as OJK, that regulate non-payment financial services in order to establish a safe environment, such as an 85% foreign ownership limit, a prohibition on any on-balance sheet lending, and a loan ceiling of around 141,000 USD. As a result of the restriction, over 1,000 illegal P2P users have already been prevented from engaging in a fraudulent behavior. So, in this context, Patrick, I guess the first question would be, from Malaysia's context, Malaysia's VC ecosystem is mostly driven by the government with a lack of private participants, which is unsustainable, obviously. So in 2021, 73% of VC funding came from the Malaysian government. Do you see this disparity in Indonesia? Who are the drivers of the VC ecosystem in Indonesia? What is the uniqueness of the Indonesian startup ecosystem as compared to its ASEAN peers?
Wow. No, thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, we start up with a bang right out the gate. I think with Indonesia, the capital base is a little bit more balanced compared to, say, Malaysia, like you said, with more sort of government-backed funds, right? So I think both in the private and the public sector, there's been very active participants, whether it's, say on the government side with a lot of CVCs being born in the past sort of decade or so. You've got CVCs of telecommunications company. You've got CVCs of banks, state-owned banks in Indonesia. They've been very active in the ecosystem, as well as I think on the private side, whether it's families that are, creating family offices or investment arms of their larger conglomerate, right? So I think both private and public have played a huge role in funding a lot of the startups, at least in the past decade or so. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, what would an ideal startup ecosystem be like? For example, what steps must Indonesia take to grow and develop to reach that ideal point?
I think for any tech ecosystems to really thrive, you need kind of four pillars, right? Obviously, I think we talked about public and sort of private sector buy-ins. I think these two are very critical. But on top of that, foreign capital, I think is very important as well, which I think Indonesia has done very well given the increase in FDI over the years, as well as more and more growth funds, from say Silicon Valley, and other markets have been very active as well. And then the fourth pillar is really the talent, right? So I think if you have those 4 pillars or 4 things firing in all cylinders, I think that breeds a very good sort of hunting ground or for startup ecosystem, right? So I think in how we try to play a role is obviously on the private sector side. You know us very well that we do have quite a few global investors that are leaning on us to be that beachhead strategy into Indonesia, right? So I think for us at Intudo, we take on that early stage risk in Indonesia. at the early stage opportunity set. And as these companies raises subsequent rounds of capital, that's when we pass the baton. It's kind of like a relay. That's when we pass the baton, to these global funds, which have, increased in terms of sort of 5x in terms of their participation in the market, which I think bodes well for the ecosystem in Indonesia. Yeah.
Okay. But how does Indonesia balance between innovation and regulation when it comes to the case of entities like OJK?
Yeah. No, I think OJK, like regulators like OJK, et cetera, they've done a tremendous job in balancing sort of, allowing startups to have room to innovate, but as well as some control and oversight, right? So I think in the cases of, say, peer-to-peer lending companies, I think your opening remarks about, those like 1,000, peer-to-peer players, closing down and as a result of bad practices and things like that. I think that was a case of, OJK stepping in, sort of to shut down the ones that have sort of predatory lending practices and things like that. But at the same time, I think they've also constructed programs like sandboxes where companies do go through, you give it time and you give it some room to see what works, what doesn't work, and if it goes off the rail a little bit, they'll kind of clamp down on you a little bit. So I think they've struck a good balance. So it's not only just in peer-to-peer, but you saw that a little bit in sort of ride-hailing, right? A little bit in the early days, and then obviously I think cryptocurrency and now I think that's getting some traction as well on the regulator side. Yeah.
Okay, so I think there's a good segue to speak a bit of the role of government in developing the funding and investment landscape in Indonesia. So due to the significant risk and unpredictability, established financial institutions are unwilling to support startups sometimes. As a result, we rely a lot on angels and VCs because venture capital funds are sometimes seen as rocket fuel. So they frequently invest in early stage enterprises, risky bets that are positioned to take off. So in Indonesia, we are seeing stronger participation from both the public and private sector to invest in seed. So like the Indonesian government last year announced a 300 million USD state-owned fund, Merah Putih Fund, that will invest in unicorns with minimum ticket size of 10 million US. And current unicorn entrepreneurs such as Kopi Kenangan established the Kenangan Fund, which pulled angel funds to offer big checks of 100,000 USD for pre-seed. So it's also intriguing to watch how established companies are acquiring startups in order to harness their tech. PT Pertamina, an Indonesian oil and gas SOE, launched the Pertamina X Scouts Open Innovation Project in 2021. This project helps energy firms with new tech applications and market expansion. So in that context, what has the Indonesian government really done to encourage better participation from the local private sector to invest in this class?
Yeah, I think. Look, I think sort of getting back to the public sector and what the government has done. So in addition to what I mentioned about the CVCs that are investment arms of, say, telcos and banks, which we have partnered with, a variety of them, and we've partnered very well with a variety of them because of the independence of Intudo, right? So I think, whatever companies that we go into together with these CVCs, we do try to, provide something else outside of the ecosystem. For example, we've done investments with a CVC of a state-owned bank where I think it was an omni-channel enabler platform, and then we were able to immediately access the variety of SME customers in that bank, for example, as well as a telecommunications company, CVC, right? We're able to access their network, and we play sort of a complementary role and provide the private sector support. Now, I think on the Merah Putih Fund, we certainly are aware. I think, between the 5 CVCs that are grouping together to form this fund, I think it's a sort of a valiant effort to fill that sort of Series B or C gap that sometimes is, in a growing tech ecosystem, sometimes the growth stage gap, requires some filling in, right? I think the Merah Putih Fund, they have a good effort and a good intent to fill that gap. And in addition to that, I think if you think about sort of the INA fund, right? They've announced so many investments on the tech side, especially with, say, Traveloka, that debt financing that they provided. and more recently with sort of with Masdar, with the Pertamina deal, as well as toll roads, a bunch of infrastructure projects. I think that also paved the way for a lot more foreign investments to either co-invest together with INA, and I think that's also the goal. So but I think all this is only made possible because I think several years ago, with the passing and the implementation of the omnibus law, that allowed for more, I think, foreign direct investments. I think that turned what used to be a negative list into now a positive list. I think there's like a variety of sectors that was negative and now it's positive, available for foreign direct investments. The ease of doing business, even something as simple as like setting up a company, applying for the proper licenses and things like that. I think it removed a lot of red tapes. Also, I think surrounding labor, the hiring and firing of people, also allowed for it really paved the way for more FDIs, right? At the end of the day, so I think it's not really just one thing, but I think the government's effort on this multitude of areas has set the stage for. That's why Indonesia is this investment destination it is today.
Okay. I was going to ask how has the Indonesian government been able to attract foreign capital? But I think you've mentioned a bit there. But just to expand on that, can we talk a little bit on the pain points in the startup landscape and how the government has tried to address these pain points?
Yeah, I think on pain points, look, in any growing sort of ecosystem, right, you will go through stages of sort of experimentation. And the nature of experimentation is that there will be failures from that, right? But we tend to shy away from saying failure. Like, it's kind of like what Michael Jordan said, right? There's no failures. There's only lessons, there's only learnings, right? So I think we certainly have learned a lot over the years, both sort of on the government, regulators, as well as investor side. I think in markets of downturn or whatever winter period that sometimes people describe the one that we're in, you do see more sort of scars, right? From either bad sort of governance in companies, or bad management decisions and things like that. So I think that in the past couple of years, that has really been showing, because I think in Indonesia's tech ecosystem, which really started, I think, around 2011, 2012, right? So we're only like a decade in, right? The first maybe 8 years has been, just gone one way up, So I think in a rising tide situation, all boats are lifted, right? So I think it's only nowadays, where in the past couple of years, where we're seeing sort of the tide kind of receding. It's like kind of what Warren Buffett said, right? You kind of see who's swimming naked, Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next talking point. So we've covered on the government's role. Let's think about external to Indonesia. So we're going to talk a bit about the expansion into other ASEAN countries from Indonesia. So, bit of background, considering each ASEAN nation has a very unique culture, it is challenging for all companies to expand into other ASEAN countries. What worked for Kopi Kenangan and Gojek may not work in other countries where the language is different. But luckily, Malaysia has similar culture where the locals can immediately resemble with the brand, can resonate with the brand. And in the case of Kopi Kenangan, Malaysians are coffee lovers. So it will always be an immediate country for expansion. But that being said, can we actually try to understand a little bit on how we find the correct product market fit in different countries from Indonesia's perspective? So the question is really, how important is VC support when it comes to a startup's expansion into a foreign country in the ASEAN context, for example?
Yeah. No, I really appreciate, I think your remark about, not sort of thinking Southeast Asia as a region, because I think when Intudo started around 7 years ago, I think our mission was to prove that, look, Southeast Asia is not one region, right? So you can't just, copy and paste what works in one country and expect that to work in another country. So that's why we are the only Indonesia-only fund. And we've spent the past, 6-7 years trying to prove that, right? But I think we are Indonesia only in the sense that we want our portfolio companies to start out in Indonesia And we want to capture the opportunity set in Indonesia at the early stage. But once it graduates into like a growth stage, for example, like Zendit, I was just talking to Taufik, like Zendit, for example, who came into Malaysia, with PayX, right? And a few other acquisitions in other markets. So once I think a company gets to a growth stage where they've defined that product market fit in in Indonesia where they've dominated, and their product has developed sort of a little bit more, excellence in terms of execution, then that playbook can be sort of transitioned into other countries like Malaysia, right? But obviously Zendit is not the only case. I mean, we do have other companies, for example, like a digital freight forwarder company that we invested called Andal in. Obviously, the nature of that business is that the more international trade routes there are, the better it is for the business, right? So for that business model, obviously, it is only natural that, they do expand and develop relationship with other trading partners, and Malaysia being strategically located sort of along the strait together with Singapore, it is a very important hub when it comes to trading. So when it comes to that line of business, I think it makes a lot of sense. No different than say our other portfolio company Cargo, right, which was invested by one of the larger groups from Malaysia, the AirAsia group in Teleport. I mean, for us to have intermodal or different modes of logistics, whether it's air freight combined with Cargo's main business in Indonesia, which is mid-mile trucking, that only makes sense as the business evolves over time, right? So I think we do have many businesses, like I said, that start out in Indonesia. We play the role of that Indonesian partner to help them dominate in country. But once it gets to a certain stage, it makes a lot of sense to come into Malaysia. And not only from the sectors that I'd mentioned. I mean, in Islamic financing, for example, actually, I would argue Malaysia is the leader in Sharia finance and things like that, right? And then Taufik and I was just chatting. I mean, maybe on the asset management side, we have a lot to learn from the asset management industry in Malaysia. So it is a very sort of interdependent relationship, I would say. I think, yes, Indonesia has those huge numbers in terms of market size, growing middle class, everything we read on whatever reports. But then I do think in special niche businesses, I think there are ways that we can learn from each other as well. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's very, very interesting. But just to circle back, there seems to be very few success stories of Malaysian startups going into Indonesia. So we just want to, dabble a bit in that subject. Why do you think this is the case? Is it due to funding, regulatory hurdles such as limitations on foreign shareholding that Indonesia has imposed? How could we reduce this friction to create an effective regional ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't think it's too much on sort of regulation or like we talked about negative lists and things like that, because I think since the passing of the omnibus law, actually that list is more of a positive list right now, right? But I think it has more to do with, I think, the market acceptance and maybe the time of when a certain company was coming into Indonesia. So I'll give you an example. So obviously I think Malaysia, with its talent base, it's more sort of B2B and business driven in many cases, right? But in terms of the industries, I would argue in a space like, for example, like electric vehicles, for example, right? Indonesia, with its vast resources in nickel and things like that, maybe it's more of a player that you could be a little bit more busy with on the upstream side of things, with battery making and things like that. But Malaysia has also been known to be a hub of assembling or manufacturing auto parts, right? So maybe the way to partner is that maybe Indonesia on the sort of the commodities and the battery side takes care of that in the early part of the value chain, but later on partner with a Malaysian partner on sort of on the downstream side of things, right? So I don't think it's definitely a two-way street. It requires I think a lot of G2G and B2B sort of discussions on which sectors that we can learn from each other. Like I mentioned earlier, I think on the Sharia or the Islamic financing side, there's definitely a lot more learning that I think we can do. So if we are to look at an opportunity set in Indonesia along this line, for that company to expand, it would be a very natural next step, for Malaysia to be that next market, right?
Okay. And conversely, what are the challenges of expanding into Malaysia for Indonesian startups? Just to be very candid, just let us know.
For Indonesia to come to Malaysia, right? Look, I think, like I said, so I think we've only what I can share is what we learned from our portfolio companies, right? So I think in the case of, say, Andalin, Cargo, as well as Zendit, right? They've all come into the Malaysian market via different modes. Some you build organically, just set up your operations. Some you do it inorganically via an acquisition, right? But I think obviously to your point earlier, I do think that it's not only just unique to Indonesia and Malaysia, but it's unique to, say, Thailand, Philippines, Singapore as well, right? All Southeast Asian markets has its own dynamics and nuances in how to operate and how to excel in that market, whether it's as basic as, say, culture, languages, understanding the government, the families that control the economies, etc. So I think it requires a very sort of customized approach to each country. So it's not just Indonesia finding difficulty or challenges coming into Malaysia. I would say that playbook you need to assess pretty thoroughly as you go into Philippines, as you go into Thailand, Vietnam. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. As a side note, we hope Penjana fulfills that role for any Indonesian startups coming to Malaysia.
Yeah.
And working with you with Intudo, it's a great pleasure. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do here at the agency, and I hope you see benefits from our efforts.
No, for sure. And again, just before we started this session, right? I think the learnings is very much two-way street, right? The sectors that are highlighted, the industries that are highlighted, I think it's something that I think Indonesia could learn a lot from Malaysia. I think expansion into the wider region, Malaysia is a very good neighbor for us in Indonesia. So we, in our very small ways, I know we're not sort of as big as Penjana, but in our very small ways, with our portfolio companies, I hope that we can play that role as your counterpart in Indonesia as well.
Yeah, pleasure. Let's talk about Indonesian startups for a bit. Why do Indonesian startups need to enter into other markets like Malaysia, for example, when the market size is already huge in Indonesia? And if they do decide to expand beyond Indonesia, when is the right time usually?
Yeah, I think obviously Indonesia has big headline numbers, right? I think everybody goes off the population. We're like one of the largest democracies, where the economy is very centralized around Java and things like that. But I think with even our own LP base, I think we try to be brutally honest. Actually, we don't think Indonesia is a 280 million population. It is, but like in terms of the market size of your business, your TAM and things like that, it's not whatever it is times 280 million. You know what I mean? Like we do dive pretty deeply into sort of the socioeconomic classes of the Indonesian market. I mean, you have the first 4 million with GDP per capita of, say, $80,000, right? That's akin to like maybe Singapore or whatever. And then you drop down to the next 50 million, which is maybe $7,000, which is more akin to, say, Thailand, right? And then you drop down to the next 120 million, which is at 1,500. And then you've got the the last 100 million, which is at $600, which is more akin to the global poor, right? So I think whatever business that you look at, I think it needs to be on a sort of a facts and circumstances basis, where what is your true TAM, right? I would argue for most of our businesses that are either B2C, which we have very few, most of our businesses are more B2B in nature. But even that, I would argue the true market size is centralized mainly in Java and mainly in Jabodetabek. And if it's in Jabodetabek, which is 24-25 million, I mean, it's not too far away from 35 million in Malaysia, right? So yes, I think headline numbers are very big, but each business model requires that lens. You got to peel sort of the onion a little bit. Then you just can't apply whatever works elsewhere and paste that business model into Indonesia and expect the entire 280 million to be a consumer, right? So I think we're pretty honest about that, and that's why I think we do have businesses that, like I said, whether it's Islamic financing, logistics, that digital freight forwarder business, that could very well be, Malaysia would make a lot of sense as a great trading partner for that line of business. payments, right? Obviously, Zendit has proven a lot of product market fit in the markets that they operate, whether it's Indonesia, Philippines, and then now Malaysia, right? So once we've defined that true product market fit and solved a lot of pain points for a lot of B2B clients, we would imagine a lot of B B customers in Malaysia would maybe benefit from a lot of these products as well. Yeah.
Okay. All right. In Western countries, there's a lot of concern towards big tech's over-influence on the overall economy and whether consumers' interests and privacy are protected. As more and more startups come out with innovative products, an example being a recent online petition with over 1,100 public signatures calling for a 6-month moratorium on further enhancements to OpenAI. So in that context, do you expect a similar development in this region? And do you think regional unicorns in ASEAN and in Indonesia will eventually turn into these so-called monopolies and threaten consumers' interests? Sorry, a bit of a heavy question, but what are your thoughts?
No, I think on this whole sort of OpenAI, ChatGPT, etc. You had a discussion with Bagita about this as well. I mean, that is. It's very new, right? First of all, it's developing, and the risks and benefits of such products and solutions to society, to consciousness, to whatever, right? I think everybody has different take on it as well, but I think how that development goes is something different in how a lot of the regional unicorns that operates in a completely different space, for example, say e-commerce and ride-hailing, where I think in the developed markets, those businesses have proven out, to be mature businesses, and there are examples in how to either regulate or sort of monitor how those business grows, right? So I think whether it's sort of anti-monopoly here and there, I don't think that set of risks, is something unique in Indonesia. We can learn from our counterparts in more developed markets.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Moving on to the next talking point, it's on the investment impact of Indonesian startups on the regional economy. So a successful startup has the ability to generate substantial economic impact. One of the greatest visible impacts on the area economy would be the creation of completely new jobs, such as a tokenomics expert position in a crypto company. The creation of these high quality jobs also allow us to attract the greatest talents to this part of the world. This will result in higher productivity and output, thereby resulting in an increase in overall income and tax revenue levels, which will in turn enhance spending power, general quality of life. So on a micro level, higher productivity brought upon by innovation increases corporate earnings and lowers costs. On a macro level, it won't aid not just economic growth, but also attract FDI and stimulate economic activity. So startups no doubt have the potential to disrupt key economic sectors and improve the overall well-being of society. What are some key trends that you are seeing in Indonesia that we should also be doing in Malaysia?
Wow. Yeah. Look, I mean, first of all, maybe I'll preface by saying, we're not a trend-based investor in Indonesia. In fact, I think whenever a business model or a trend gets a little bit too hot, we tend to shy away just because I think it attracts a wrong type of founder, because that's when a lot of fake founders try to enter that space because it's trendy. We also feel, I think a lot of VC funds, they use this trapping technique where they announce certain sector will be hot so that entrepreneurs dive into this industry thinking that funding will be easy, right? So I think maybe I'll just preface that our investment thesis is a little bit more, I would say, moat driven than say trend-based investing, right? So if you were to ask me what's the next big thing in Indonesia, I probably, maybe there are other VC funds that claim that can claim they can do that better. But for us, I think we're very much a moat driven investor, right? But for us, I think in Indonesia, we are seeing some business models that, especially I think on the SME side, not to say digitalization of SME is a trend that applies to Malaysia, but what has worked for us in some of our portfolio companies, for example, is say, for example, we have this business called Jago Coffee, right? Where I think it is a mobile cafe business. It empowers baristas to become their own entrepreneurs. I think that that business model, creates a lot of employment opportunity and a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Where I think they can eventually have a path to own their own electric bike. They have a cafe or this cart built into it where they can ride to different locations and serve coffee freshly, at on site, right?
Yeah, I've seen those in Jakarta when I was there.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Yeah.
No. We're very excited about that business, and so something like that, I think, will aspire, entrepreneurship, right? In the Malaysian context, I think, just as it has been in Indonesia. I also think the local eatery space, I think we have a business called Wahyu that has done, has made a lot of impact to a lot of these warteg owners in Indonesia, where I think in the beginning their reach has only been on a very hyper local level, just selling, their daily meals to just whoever's in that radius, right? But with the online presence, as well as now, I think they're pivoting to a business model where they can use their kitchen as a way to perform sort of like a ghost kitchen concept, where they can make extra income by cooking food from sort of Wahyu recipes and things like that. Allows a lot of these owners to have more income and therefore maybe more employment. And with a cascading effect to different people that serves this business model, right? So I think maybe I think those would just from my brief trip over here, maybe some of the things that would be a little bit more similar that may or may not work here in Malaysia.
Yeah, downstairs we have we don't call it coffee cart, but we have a coffee kancil. Kancil is the name of our smallest car in Malaysia, and they will sell it out of the back of the car.
See?
And for like 5 ringgit Americanos with a drip coffee, right? So
there you go.
Some similarities there.
Yeah.
But yeah, very interesting. In Jakarta, they're everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
They ride around. They're mobile.
That's right. That's right. It's an electric bike. And yeah.
Okay, moving on. Startups need to be able to balance between operational and commercial viability. So not all good ideas can eventually make money. And I'm sure you see that, with Intudo looking at the seed space. Not all good ideas can generate substantial profit returns. So have you encountered a startup that you think has very unique value propositions, but just couldn't scale enough and eventually tapered off?
Yeah, I think, not every business is made for VC funding. You know what I mean? I think there are some business models, and the reason I say that is, as you know, I think VC, our fund is subject to a very sort of high bar in terms of expected return that we need to generate for our LPs, and therefore, and also within a very specific time frame, right? Time period and investment horizon. So given that constraint or those parameters in a fund, it just may not align very well with some business models. You know what I mean? So some business models may benefit from a more sort of sector or maybe expertise focused fund that has maybe a longer time horizon or maybe a lower expected return profile, right? So I think maybe, like I said, maybe I'll just disclaim that first. Now, I think business model wise, we actually from the get-go, and we're not just saying this because it's trendy to say this now, right? But everybody is nowadays saying, oh yeah, your business model needs to have a path to profitability. You need to focus on margin and things like that. But if you trace back to what we've said ever since Fund 1, we have always approached investment with that lens, right? So I think, when we think about investment, I think we do want to build businesses with a more sustainable business model. And the way we try to give our companies that unfair advantage is to leverage that relationship with over 30 families that we have in Indonesia, for the benefit of the startups that we invest in. So that, at early stage, that's why we like a lot of B2B businesses, because we can help them shortcut that customer acquisition process and take them to, our LPs. Many of them are sort of diversified conglomerates, and many of them are, being run by either third or fourth generation business owners now, which are, a lot more open-minded about how to incorporate technology into, certain part of their value chain or their business process. So I think we also act as their solution to help them, digitally transform, right? But at the same time, in the eyes of the founders that we invest in, we also serve them up with potential partners, potential customers, and things like that. So I think it's a very sort of codependent relationship. I think we try to foster a more sort of healthy work environment. If we can apply this to the entire tech ecosystem in Indonesia, but in our very small ways, just within the Intudo portfolio, we always strive to find synergies either between our portfolio companies or with our sort of partners in Indonesia.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So just to summarize the talking points before we go to some standing and fun personal questions. First of all, we have covered growth and development of the Indonesian startup ecosystem. We've explored the role of government in developing the funding and investment landscape in Indonesia. We've talked about expansion into other ASEAN countries. And we've also talked about VC as impact investing in this region. So that's what we've covered over Indonesia. I think now it's just over to you on a VC level. Could you just give us a bit of tips on LP management, for example? How do you manage the relationships within Indonesia? What are the dynamics between the different families, etc.? What's your take on that?
Yeah, we've been very lucky, to be honest. We've been very lucky with our LP base in all three of our funds. They're all very engaging. They're all, and again, different types of LPs invest in us for different reason, right? Some are either to learn about the market. We stay very, very actively engaged with our LPs whenever it's, say market knowledge, or they need background checks on someone that they're looking at, or they need to understand certain nuances in a specific field. So we actually enjoy sort of engaging with our LPs a lot. Partly because we also leverage on their expertise in the industry, right? Because I think as a VC, unless you're a very sort of subject matter expertise focused VC, for us, we are a country-specific VC, but sector-wise, we're a little bit agnostic, right? So we do lean on our LPs a lot in their experiences and expertise in different industries, right? And learn about their pain points that they go through in their old line industries. And then, we in turn, go and source, maybe there's a digital solution to help solve their pain points, right? Whether it is a consumer insights platform that help replace their previous vendor, which they're paying heaps amounts of money, for data that's usually late and very expensive, right? Maybe there's a digital solution to do online surveys with your respondent base that you recruit yourself, and you can turn around data in 3 to 5 days. That allows these fast-moving consumer goods companies to make management decisions in a faster manner, right? So it's things like that. We actually learned about the pain points of these traditional businesses, and therefore went and sourced companies that way, and vice versa, right? So that's one way. The other way is that when we meet a founder, our channel check is just very bottoms up. We build all our business cases and investment cases bottoms up. So only if we bring them to these families and CEOs, and only until they strike a commercial deal with them, then that gives us conviction to move forward with that company, right? So we don't. Our investment memos, I don't think we try to, copy and paste what we see in industry reports and talk about trends and this and that. But I think we try to collect empirical evidence, that is really on the ground, for us to decipher whether a startup's product truly has product market fit or not. So I think we've enjoyed that engagement with LPs because they also lean on us, for that knowledge and digitalization strategy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to go off the cuff a bit since I've asked all the questions on the script.
Okay.
How do you manage your biases when you source for deals? Given that we rely a lot on LPs and they may have relationships and connections, it's how they refer the deal to you. How do you as a VC manager remove that bias? Do you just purely go all empirical? How do you balance that?
Yeah, and no, this is I think this is our secret sauce. So I think for us, we like to tag team a lot on deals. So in our organization, first of all, our investments team, they're full stack, which means we don't bifurcate between deals team and ops team, and I think whoever sources the deal, diligences it, collects that empirical evidence and with the channel checks, and would like to lead most of our rounds. So that board seat, they sit on the board together with myself and Eddie, where I think I come from a more hyper-local lens, where, these local relationships and local conglomerates, we provide that hyper-local lens. But then Eddie provides that global lens, from the perspective of his experiences and his global lens, right? So I think we combine that hyper-local between myself and Eddie, and we're supplemented by either one or two associates on every deal, right? So there is never, I hear of some GPs. I think some funds they split deals by GPs. This is like this GP's deal, this is that GP's deal. In Intudo, that's never the case. And I think we enjoy this tag teaming approach and the hyperlocal plus global approach, partly because we realize we have our own personal biases, just like you astutely mentioned, and we want to cover each other's blind spots, right? Sometimes we can carry a lot of emotions, going into a deal, but somebody that steps in to cover our blind spot can give a more, objective opinion, about a situation, right? So I think we realize that a lot, and that's why I think for us, we keep a pretty diverse team for that reason.
Well, that satisfied my curiosity. Okay, I shall go back to the script. So, we have some standing questions that we ask every guest. So just feel free to just answer this, in a fun way. It's we ask like fun questions like this. So the first one is, if you could invest and start any business or industry, regardless of current market trends, assuming you have all the money in the world, what would it be and why?
This is me personally, right? Yeah. Okay.
Just for fun.
Yeah. No, look, I think. Look, I'm very lucky to have Eddie. Eddie is my partner, so we shoot the breeze a lot, and I think sometimes we talk about building some cash flow positive businesses. You know what I mean, right?
It's rare to find us,
right? I think Eddie wants to build like a soy sauce business, right?
Wow.
And then whereas for me, I have a sweet tooth, so I like ice cream a lot, and an ice cream and pizza joint. Look, I know it sounds very silly, but you never know, man. I mean, there's a place and time for everything, right? So yeah, I think that might be.
That's cool, man. What do you consider a must-read book or a must-listen podcast for those interested in the startup landscape?
Yeah, look, I mean, my mode of learning is I like to listen. So the podcasts work way better for me. And to be honest, nowadays it's very bad now. I'll try to do better. I don't have that much time to read because I have to read like investment memos, research reports a lot already, right? But podcast wise, I really like Acquired. I don't know if you've listened to that.
Okay.
It's one of the best podcasts I've listened to. So they is these two a host where I think they're both venture investors, but every episode they dive very deep into the journey of, say, a VC fund or like a company, right? So there'd be an episode, for example, on TSMC, right? Or like on, LVMH, right? Or even on Benchmark Capital, which is a fund that I think, both Eddie and I really aspire to, right? With their fund size discipline and things like that, and how they approach their relationship with founders, right? So I really enjoy Acquired a lot.
Acquired, okay.
Yeah. That's highly recommended. Yeah.
Is it on Spotify?
It's on Spotify.
It's
on Spotify.
Check it out. Our listeners, please check it out too. Thanks, Patrick. And our last standing question would be, what advice would you offer to aspiring entrepreneurs in Malaysia or ASEAN in general?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm trying to I'm trying to be original here, but I wanted to say, come on, man, follow your passion and all that, but I think enough people say that.
So
okay, I'm gonna try to be original. Honestly, I feel I feel being an entrepreneur is very hard. And it's very lonely, okay? So maybe this one or maybe two things that I'm about to say is that you just got to find a good partner, okay? And I feel very fortunate for me, both on and off the court, for example, I found my wife, in sort of that has helped with my personal life, and I found Eddie in work life, right? So I think having a good partner that you can really rely on, that I think Eddie and I always say, right, if you close your eyes and if you close your eyes and fall backwards, I know he'll catch me, and I know my wife will catch me as well. So if you have that true relationship with that partner, it really doesn't matter on you sort of follow your passion or whatever. Like whatever you do, you'll find a lot of joy. I just feel if you try to be someone that you're not, I know a lot of sort of great mentors and motivational speakers say this all the time, but for me, I think that journey with a true partner to go through the ups and downs, that will give you most joy. So I think for me, if you define success early on, and regardless of what yardstick you measure success by, right? If it's money, it's one thing, but if it's joy, if it's like sort of personal growth, personal development growth and things like that, then having a good partner to be with you side by side through the ups and downs, I think that, at least for me personally, that gives me a lot of joy and something that I'll never regret. Yeah.
Wow, that's very nice. Very nice. Great way to end the episode. So we hope you found this episode informative and thought-provoking. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us and we will address it in the next episode. Don't forget to tune in next time as we continue our journey to explore the world of VC and bring you expert insights and in-depth discussions. Thank you for listening to The Long Game. Thank you, Patrick, for being here.
Thanks.
He did fly all the way from Indonesia, so we're very, very pleased to have him here. Until next time, keep playing the long game and stay ahead of the game in the world of venture capital. Thanks, Patrick.
Great. Thanks, Harold. Thank you. Thank you, bro. Thank you.